students. Today will be terminology to be used. So, I have glossary or terminology Z into different modeling a part of everything. So, let us start with a bit on and certain terms. So, cooking techniques are procedures for preparing food and good to take into account and cooking fuel resource. Food to call them techniques and methods of French cooking, which is techniques. Now, the dish can affect as much if not then the now most often we think matter, but it is the mix which matter most as ingredients and how using them. So, those shared amongst the way example boiling, which many cuisines such as have evolved their own cooking techniques evolved also. Now, fuel as in wood China. So, the technique of and vegetables is so that they would require less cooking in the cooking of Chinese. The techniques in Western cuisine food are beating, crimping, etc. Now, to learn in the form of the definitions. Now, this in Western cuisine, baking, broiling, etc. Usually divide techniques into or wet cooking techniques, steam, and dry cooker as the main heat method, which is adds crisp but does not tenderize. Now, the ingredients cook small, thin, think and roasting vegetables. Even deep frying count as they are cooked with oil. The moist heat involves cooking like poaching fish. In wet cooking method, temperature of the cooking heat is centigrade. Maximum temperature of boiling, poaching, steaming and stewing count as the third category in methods, and it offers cooking periods to the tough cuts of braising, the pork. And some people say that completely but others counter that involves excite it would fall under the. Now, choosing the correct not only impacts the also affects the texture flavor of the dish. The terminology now al dente, this word very often now in is used to describe cooked until it offers to the bite. Cooked by dry heat, barbecue generally to refer to grilling or over an open fire. More specific to long, slow, including liberal barbecue sauce. Now, I have used this definition. Moisten the foods during drippings or special flavor and prevent batter. Contains flour and liquid to pour. Mix rapidly in smooth and light as much air as possible to thicken it by stirring in flour, butter, yolks, vegetable pure. Blanching is a very common by everyone. It is any food item in wrap and allow it to cool. Now, blending incorporate 2 or more. Next is boil liquid until bubbles on the surface, which is used to meat, where the meat along with vegetables cooked slowly in liquid partially submerged. This combines cooking, making a to coat the food. Standard method is salted flour, then breadcrumbs. These are usually pan fried clarified butter until. Now, broil is strong direct heat. Cook over medium till surface of the food darkens in color. Food with melted butter, other liquid using a caramelize, melting and cooking sugar over low heat until it turns into a syrup that is brownish in color and has lot of flavor, which in turn adds flavor to the food. Now, caramelization, it refers to the browning that occurs during cooking of any type of food. Now, chiffonade is to slice a herb or a vegetable into thin strips or shreds. Chop, using your chef's knife to cut food into bite-sized pieces. Now, this is called chopping. As we all know, it is very common. All of us use these techniques. Now, clarify. In clarification, some process of making liquid clear by adding either beaten egg whites, ground meat and tomato, and then simmering slowly. The liquid is then strained and the result is what we call consommé, which is a clear fluid. Also, melting butter in the preparation of ghee over medium heat, so the milk solids settle to the bottom and impurities float to the top. The foamy top is discarded and the pure golden liquid butter is ladled off into a clean container for other cooking uses. The word coat, it means coat, evenly covering the food with flour, crumbs, herbs, oil or batter. Now, cream is a word which all of you must have heard being used very often with respect to the baking of the cake. Now, to soften a fat, especially butter, by beating it at room temperature, butter and sugar are often creamed together, making a smooth, soft paste. Crimp is to create a decorative edge on a piece pie crust, also which seals the edges together like we mostly do for gujiyas or karanji. Crisp is to restore the crunch to the vegetables such as celery and lettuce when the vegetable becomes limp. This can be done with an ice water bath. Stale crackers can be crisped in a medium oven or a microwave. Also, a type of a pan-baked dessert made of cooked fruit with a crunchy flavor and sugar topping. Croquettes. Croquettes are very common savory items which are served as snack. Now, chopped seasoned food held together by cream sauce, eggs, flour or breadcrumbs, shaped and then breaded with breadcrumbs and which are deep fried and they are not sauteed. These are called croquettes. Crush is to reduce a food to small particles, usually using a mortar and pestle like crushing pepper or crushing garlic, rolling pin or the bottom of a pot. Now, to crush crackers, you may place them in a double bag and roll a rolling pin over them. Crystallize. It is to form sugar or honey syrups into crystals, hardened crystals, by cooking it to a hard crack stage and letting it cool on a oil surface. The term also describes a sugar coating surrounding a fruit which is dipped in a egg white and granulated sugar mixture. Curdle is to separate into liquid and solid particles, example sour milk. Cure is to preserve meats by drying and salting or smoking. A dash is a measurement which is approximately a pinch or less. Deglaze is another word we hear so much while watching the various cookery shows. It is adding liquid to a pan in which foods have been sauteed, fried or roasted to dissolve the caramelized juices which are stuck to the bottom of the pan. Degrease. Degrease, as the word suggests, is to remove fat from the surface of stews, soups or stock, usually cooled in the refrigerator so that the fat hardens and forms a layer on top and it can easily be removed. Dice is to cook food in small cubes of uniform size and shape. Very often we use this term, dicing of vegetables. Now, dissolve is to cause a dry substance to pass into a solution in a liquid. Drain is to remove all the liquid using a colander or a strainer by pressing a plate against the food while tilting the container. Dot is the term which is used to place small bits of ingredients, especially butter, on foods at random intervals for the purpose of adding flavor and to aid in the browning during cooking. Now, double a recipe. When we say double a recipe, it means to increase the recipe amounts by 2. Dough, it is a combination of ingredients which usually include flour, water or milk, and sometimes a leavening agent like a baking powder, which produces a pliable mixture for making baked goods. Now, dredge is the term used to describe completely coating the food in flour and shaking off the excess. Drizzle, pouring a liquid such as melted butter, olive oil or other liquid in a slow trickle over the food. Dust is another term which we use for baking of the foods, where it is to sprinkle food with dry ingredients or the baking pan with flour over butter. Use a strainer or a jar with a perforated cover, or try the good old fashioned way of shaking things together in a paper bag. Fillet is to remove the bones from the fish or meat for cooking. Filter is to remove impurities by passing through paper, cheesecloth or certain leather. Products like which we call chinoise. Now, firm ball stage is where we cook to the point where the boiling syrup, when especially sugar, is dropped in cold water. It forms a hard ball that is compact yet gives slightly to the touch. Generally, it reaches this stage at 243 degrees Fahrenheit. Flake is to break lightly into small pieces. Now, flambe is a French technique where to flame the foods by putting it in some form of potable alcohol and setting it alight. Fold, it is a very common technique which is used while preparing the batter for the cakes, is to incorporate a delicate substance such as whipped cream or beaten egg whites into another substance without releasing air bubbles. Cut down through mixture with a spoon, whisk or fork and go across the bottom of the bowl up and over close to the surface. The process is repeated while slowly rotating the bowl until ingredients are thoroughly blended. Now, fricassee is to cook by braising, usually applied to fowl, that is chicken or rabbit. Now, fry, as we all know, is a cooking method where the food is cooked in hot oil. Deep frying means the food is completely submerged in the hot oil. Pan frying or shallow frying uses a smaller amount of oil and the food is not submerged completely. Garnish, as we all know, is a very common term used with respect to the display of cooked dish. It is to decorate a dish both to enhance its appearance and to provide a flavorful foil. Now, parsley, lemon slices, raw vegetables, coriander, mint, etc. are all forms of herbs which are used as garnishes. Glaze is to cook with a thin sugar syrup cooked to crack stage, and the mixture may be thickened slightly. Also, to cover with a thin glossy icing is called as glazing. Grate is to rub on a grater that separates the food into various sizes of bits or shreds. Now, we go to the next, that is grease. Grease is to lightly coat any pan or a tawa, etc. with oil, butter, margarine or non-sticky spray so that the food does not stick on while cooking or baking. Grill, very most oftenly used or very common, is to cook on a grill over intense heat. Grind is the next method. It is to process the solids by hand or mechanically to reduce them to tiny particles. Next is to halve a recipe. Reduce the amounts of a recipe by 50%. Earlier I told you how to double the recipe. This is how to half the recipe. Now hardball stage is again with respect to cooking the sugar syrup. Now in candy making, the point at which syrup has cooked long enough to form a solid ball in cold water. This stage is reached between 250 and 268 degrees, and it is next to the soft ball stage. Ice is a term which is used to spread frosting on a cake, cupcake or pastry, and also to cool down cooked food by placing them in ice and water. So two terms in one. Infusion is the extracting flavors by soaking them in liquid which is heated in a covered pan. For example, tea that we do, green tea or any tea, when we put a tea bag in a hot water and cover it, what we are getting is an infusion. Gel is a process to set or solidify, usually by adding gelatin. Juliennes is a method or to cut the vegetables, fruits or cheeses into thin strips. Knead, in India we know very well what it means, that is KNEAD, is to work the dough of flour with the heels of your hands in pressing and folding motion until it becomes smooth and elastic, and it helps in developing the gluten in the flour. And we'll start with the letter L. Line is to place layers of foil, silicone paper or wax paper in a pan to prevent sticking. This is called the lining the pan or lining the tray. Lukewarm. Lukewarm, neither cool nor warm, approximately body temperature, with reference to any kind of liquid or food. Marinate is to flavor and moisturize pieces of meat, poultry, seafood or vegetables by soaking them in or brushing them with a liquid mixture of various seasonings known as marinade. The dry marinade mixture is composed of salt, pepper, herbs or spices, and also may be rubbed into the meat, poultry or seafood. Now very easy to understand is to mash. To squash the food with a fork, spoon or masher. Now mince, we know very well mince is to cut or chop the food into extremely small pieces, and everybody, I don't think, need an introduction to the word called mix, which is to combine the ingredients usually by stirring. Moisten is also a term which most of us know. It is adding only enough liquid to dry ingredients to dampen them. Now we come to another a slightly better term which we is the pan broiling. It is to cook uncovered any food in a hot frying pan, pouring off the fat as it accumulates. Generally fleshy food like meat or poultry or fish is used to do pan broiling, and especially red meat, because it helps to remove the excess fat. Now pan fry is a method of dry heat method, where it is to cook in small amounts of butter or other fat like oil or any other ghee, etc., where the food is turned over once or twice. Parboil is to boil until partially cooked to any food, especially vegetables, etc. To blanch, usually this procedure is followed by final cooking in a seasoned sauce. It is blanching helps in retaining the color, the flavor and the nutrients, and the food looks very crisp and fresh and nice. Parboil is to boil until partially cooked, especially any kind of vegetables, and usually this procedure is followed by final cooking in a seasoned sauce. Mainly parboiling helps in retaining the color, the crispness and the nutrients of a vegetable. A pare, P-A-R-E, is to remove the outermost skin of a fruit or vegetable. Next is peel. P-E-E-L is to remove or strip off the skin or rind of some fruits and vegetables. Pickle is a technique to preserve meats, vegetables and fruits in brine or any other spicy liquids etc. using oil also. Pinch is a term which is used often. It is the small amount that you can hold between your thumb and forefinger, which is called as a pinch of pepper, a pinch of saffron, etc. Pipe is to using a pastry bag to squeeze a soft food through a decorative tip to create a swirl and artful designs of the product onto another surface, especially with respect to the cake and the cake decorations. Pit, P-I-T, is to take out the center stone or seed of a fruit such as a nectarine or a plum or apricot, etc. Plump, to soak dry fruits in a liquid until they swell, like the plumping of raisins, the plumping of dry figs, etc. When we soak them in the water and they absorb the moisture, that is called plumping. Poach is to simmer in a liquid that is just below the boiling point, usually about 208 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, most often poaching is done for eggs, so that we do not use any fat in their cooking and they give us the effect of what we call the bullseye or the fried eggs. Pressure cooking is a very common method followed in Indian cuisine. It is a method that uses steam under a locked lid or under pressure to produce high temperatures and achieve a faster cooking time, which helps in retaining the nutrients as well as in saving the fuel like gas. Proof is the term used for the growth of a yeast dough rise prior to baking. For example, pizza base or the bread. So, when it is allowed to rise, this term is used as proof. The process proofing is the term used to describe the process of yeast dough's growth leading to the final baking. Punch down, again with respect to the fermented doughs. For yeast risen products, after letting the dough rise, punching it down knocks out the air before turning it out onto a floured surface for shaping. Puree is to mash foods until perfectly smooth by hand or by rubbing through a sieve or food mill or by whirling in a blender or a food processor. We start with the letter R. Reduce is a very common term. It is to boil down or to reduce the volume, especially of any liquid containing food. Next is refresh, is to run cold water over food that has been parboiled to stop the cooking process quickly. Now, render is to make solid fat into liquid by melting it slowly. Rest in bread making is to let the dough sit a few minutes before shaping. Roast is to cook by dry heat in an oven. Saute is to cook or brown food in a small amount of hot fat. Scald is to bring to a temperature just below the boiling point. Scallop is to bake a food usually in a casserole with sauce or other liquid. Crumbs often are sprinkled over. A score is a term which many people do not understand, but it has a very easy definition. It is to cut narrow grooves or gashes of part way through the outer surface of the food. Sear is to brown very quickly by intense heat. This method increases the shrinkage but develops flavor and improves the appearance. Set, S-E-T. To set is let the food become solid either in the refrigerator or by any other method. Shred is to cut or tear the food into small, long, narrow pieces especially with hand. That is called shredding. For example, in preparation of salads, mostly lettuce is shredded and not chopped. Sift is to put one or more dry ingredients through a sieve or a sifter. Simmer is the term to cook slowly in liquid over low heat. The surface of the liquid should be barely moving, broken from time to time by slowly rising bubbles. Skim is to remove the impurities, whether scum or fat, from the surface of a liquid during cooking, thereby resulting in a clear, cleaner tasting final produce. Now, steep is to extract color, flavor or other qualities from a substance by leaving it in water just below the boiling point. Sterilize. Sterilize a food means to destroy the microorganisms by boiling, either by dry heat in an oven or by steam. Stew the food, STEW, is to simmer slowly in a small amount of liquid for a long time. Now, stir is to mix ingredients with a circular motion until well blended or of uniform consistency. Now, next is stir fry. It is a Chinese method which is being used across the world nowadays because it saves nutrients and helps in retaining the color, the crispness and the flavor of the food. So, to quickly cook small pieces of food over high heat until constantly stirring the food until it is crisply tender. It is usually done using a wok, W-O-K, the Chinese fry pan. Stock, the liquid that results from simmering the bones, vegetables and seasonings in water or any other liquid. Thin, T-H-I-N, is reducing the thickness with the addition of more liquid. Toss, T-O-S-S, is the term to completely combine several ingredients by mixing lightly in an upward lifting motion. Whip is to beat rapidly to incorporate air and produce expansion, as in heavy cream or egg whites. Next is whisk, W-H-I-S-K, is to beat ingredients such as heavy or whipping creams, eggs, salad dressings or sauces with a fork or a whisk to mix, blend or incorporate air. Now, we come to the end of the terminology with the letter Z, and one term which is there is zest, Z-E-S-T, the outer colored part of the peel of the citrus fruits. So, students, I hope I have given you enough number of terms, the maximum number of terms starting with A to Z in terms of the food preparation. So, if anything is there, you can follow in the lessons various tips and pointers which are given.